2, and I was involved with the campus ministry at Marshall University, working on my master's degree. We decided we were going to have a special retreat. You remember some of those guys. That's over 40 years ago. I think it was 82. I think it was even in April. Harry was our featured speaker. And it was because of Harry, he has a great ability to speak to people. And I've always appreciated that about him. I consider him a very good friend. I love Harry. I'm going to let Harry take it over here, but it's Harry's time.
All right. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, I want to thank Alan for inviting me to the conference and giving me an opportunity to speak. I also want to thank those who came to this session. It is a little different session. He asked me what I was passionate about when it came to the church and the gospel and sharing it with people. And we landed on the children. My topic is let the children come to me. The first time I saw her, she was laying on a blanket, crawling around in front of the administration building at one of our Christian universities. The last time I saw her, she was asking people for their favorite Bible verse and their name beside it because she was getting ready to attend a Christian university, having just graduated from high school. Let the children come unto me. I want to say from the beginning that this is not a lesson on parenting or grandparenting. That part is a given, and that's the foundation. I'm talking about those of us who actually go to church, worship with young kids that are around us. I want to put it this way. Almost all of us love and adore our grandparents and our grandchildren, if you have any. And yet there are many people inside of our congregations, older people who have no one, and younger people who really don't have the kind of impact or influence, or maybe they do. And all I want to say is that I just want to kind of open it up a little bit and say, maybe we should recognize a little bit more the older folks who don't have anybody, just to spend a little time from here to there. And maybe we should recognize the little one walking by occasionally. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to open it up for questions at the end or insights that you want to share. But here's the passage I want to start with. It's Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 6. At the time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put them in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones to believe in me to sin, it will be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea." Jesus puts a high priority on children. We all get the disciples' challenge. Jesus is teaching them eternal truths. They're changing their lives. They're giving up much. They're sacrificing. They have faith in God. And it seems like whenever there's children, they think it's a distraction. And yet, Jesus never sees it that way. Jesus always sees it as an opportunity to engage and to teach. And I knew a couple like that. I won't mention their name. It would probably embarrass them. But I knew a couple like that when I was in college. They were the busiest people on campus, but they always had time for everybody. They were busy, but they were never in a hurry. Do you know people like that? They get things done, but they always have a moment for you to make you feel comfortable or to recognize you. That's kind of what we're going to talk about this morning, this afternoon. So I want you to realize that, again, I don't want it to be misunderstood that I'm thinking anything that an outsider's impact on a child is more than their family. That's the foundation. And yet we can aid that impact in how we treat and how we interact with them, and that's what I want to talk about. I think we really have two great legacies in our lives when it comes to our heritage, and one is our children, which we hope to pass on our faith to become faithful, and the other is we want to leave them a legacy, hopefully dying in the Lord. Yeah, we'd like to leave this and leave that and all that neat stuff, but I think the greatest legacy we can leave them is to die in the Lord. So let the children come. Like I said, Jesus is always busy, but he always have time for them. Now, here's what I want you to know. When we talk about people's children, we're talking about sacred grounds here. There are precautions that need to be taken and need to be paid attention to. Um, Oftentimes, you develop a relationship with a child at church simply because of how his loved ones treat you. They see a loved one respect you, like you, or treat you, and they adopt that because there's no reason to fear it or not like it. Matter of fact, here's my theory on grandparents. You know why grandparents are so appreciated? It's twofold. One is they're wiser and they know how to love and they can see their legacy. You know what the other is? Instantly, their kids see their parents reverence these people like nobody else they know. And so that's instantly a bond of safety, it's a bond of appreciation, and it's a bond that can carry on through for generations. And the flip side of that is true. If you've ever seen families where there's a huge dysfunction somewhere between the alliances of the care and the loving, it's different. Well, the same thing is true with children. When I see the little kids at church and I say hi to them and they say hi back and they do all those things, oftentimes it's simply because they've seen their parents speak, their grandparents speak, or someone else. Everybody's different when you teach. Every time I teach a young class, I start off with this statement. If I say anything or do anything that you don't understand or you need explanation on, by all means, talk to your parents. Why? Because we never, ever try to trump the parents. It's sacred grounds when people put their children in your hands and allow you to teach and to instruct them. So that's the heartbeat of it. Now, here's some precautions. I want us to realize that this will be tough saying, but you'll get it. You should never say or do anything with a child that you wouldn't be willing to say and do in front of their parent. All right, serious business. We're talking about little minds here who adore you, who watch you, who have you have in class. You should never, ever, ever take liberties with them that you would not take in front of their parents, meaning that you should always be acting out of integrity and out of righteousness. Right up until the point, as I say, even when you're in class. I just think it's so important to handle it that way. See the little kids in church. You say hello. You have them in class. You ask a question. They talk. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes we ask them to do things in class they're comfortable with. Sometimes they're not. But they're always in that growing stage because they want to learn. The goal is not to try to embarrass them, but at the same time to encourage them. This is my standard joke in this. One of the reasons I think I have a bond with little children is I think they think I'm one of them. They somehow see me, their size, their everything, and so consequently, they think I'm one of them. But I can tell you a secret. Do you know what it is? Here's what it is. We simply acknowledge them. We see them, and we say hello. Now, I've been pretty fortunate. My wife works in 4-H, has been an advisor for 47 years. That was 10 years before she was born, but 47 years. And she works with youth also. And there is something pretty special when you're able to connect and listen to youth. Here's one of the staples that I have when I'm teaching a class. If anyone inside of that class does anything outside of the building in a favorable way, I want to either try to go to support and encourage them, or I at least want to ask them how they did. We actually open every first 3 to 5 minutes of our class with this question. What did you do good this past week? And then we let them share that. And it's amazing at that age when you're working with youth what you'll get. Sometimes you'll get sports. Sometimes you'll get, I actually did make up my bed. You get all kind of stuff. It's kind of amazing, but they get to talk about it, and it also lets you get a little bit closer to them and let them also share in what you do. Recognition, instruction, and encouragement. When you stop and think about it, here's the heartbeat. Our parents teach us by the way they live, by the instruction they give us, and by how they love the Lord is our first introduction to how we're going to see God. As solid as that is. And yet, as we get older in life, we realize that there were people somewhere in our lives that either mirrored that, complemented that, or encouraged that almost validated what we grew up with in another way. Jesus said it this way, a prophet's without honor in his own country. I used to say this, you know what a great guy is? He's an ordinary guy from another town. That's a great guy. But the reality is, here's something that I had to learn with my children personally. I've tried to teach certain things and say certain things, and I know I've said it I don't know how many times, and then my son will come to me and say, you're not going to believe this, but this guy said da 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 da, and then he'll explain it in absolute detail that I thought we had covered 150 times, but he heard it. And so here's my rule. Genius hears it one time and gets it. Everybody else hears it again and again and again, and it validates it and gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And the reality is, if it's good and advantageous, then by all means, we want them to get it wherever they find it. You know, we talk about the children. The Bible really doesn't say a whole lot about Jesus' youth, but it does. You know, he's 12. We know the story. We don't understand how they got so far without him being there, except for that's how they traveled. And but when they find him, he's where? He's in the temple, and he's asking questions, and he's listening. And then it says this. It says that from there on, he grew in favor with God and with man. And that's really our goal, isn't it? We want to grow in favor with God, and we want to grow in favor with man in the things that we do and how we live and the impact that we have on children. We think about, you know, Timothy. Timothy's faith comes from his grandmother and his mother. And yet, Paul fans it. Paul becomes his father in the faith. There's no doubt he taught him much, worked with him, and yet it originates at his very own home. The value of children growing up in the faith. I know we all understand this, and I'm certainly not distracting from it, but we all know the value of we got to take the gospel all over the world. And we do. But we can't miss our homes. We have to do our best to make sure that's where it starts, and that's where our highest impact is that we can possibly give. So the validation for other people is always, always, always good. This is, I want to say this. I was, last Sunday, about 3 weeks ago, we were in Sunday morning worship. And everybody was kind of milling out of the auditorium. For some reason, we're usually the last one milling out, and we're milling out. And we look across, and I see a little guy over there, and he looks at me the same time I look at him. And all of a sudden, you know, I can see a little light in his eye. And he makes a beeline to me. And I'm excited because he's running over to me. True story. He runs over, and he stops right in front of me with this big grin, and he sticks his fist up like this. And I'm thinking, oh, man, this is cool. Little dude give me a fist bump. And when I went to bump his fist, he pulled it back and ran back across the auditorium. And I thought, ha, 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 ha. We're getting somewhere. We're covering a little ground here. He was letting me know on his terms that he saw me, and that was enough. Although I got to be honest, he threw me a curveball. I was a little concerned there. I thought for certain that we were going to be able to talk and spend a lot more time there. But he gave me the fist bump, and he darted across. And I thought, you know what? We're covering a little bit of ground. We're covering a little bit of ground. I have, I wouldn't embarrass him, but I have a picture. It's when I got it. I got it a Sunday afternoon. It's in my Bible. It's a young man when he was about 8 years old, and he was playing Midget League football. We called it Midget League. They call it, I think it's called Midget League now, but he's playing Little League football. And he's in his uniform, and I have it, and it's in my Bible, and I was looking at it just today. That boy is 17 now, 17 years old, grown man, driving, doing his thing. And growing up to be a wonderful young man that you can encourage, who's obeyed the gospel, who's taken on a leadership role in the church, comes from a solid, God-fearing family. And yet, at the same time, I was able to at least recognize him when he was coming through. I remember one time they were going out of town and called us up and asked us if we would actually take him to football practice. And then they gave me the instructions. He puts his helmet on last, his shoulder pads go on first. I mean, they gave me all this litany of stuff, and we were cracking up and doing. He's like, they really going to let you take him off of there? And they did, because why? Watch this. When they put their stamp of approval on you, it's because they think you're going to do the right thing by the child. It's because they think that the principles that they align with in serving Christ are the same principles that you align with in serving Christ. And when that happens, it's a very, 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 very good thing. Validation is one of the most powerful things that we get to enjoy when we stop and think about it. So when we think about Christ and we think about preaching the gospel, we share it from so many different perspectives. We share it from the lessons. We share it from the teaching. We share it from how we interact with other people. I used to hear this all the time, and I guess it's probably true. There's a couple preachers in here I see that probably will validate this. They say that you can always tell what the family thinks about the preacher when he comes over, because you can tell by how the kids interact with him or how the kids behave. Whether that's true or not, I do not know, but I have heard that, and I'm sure that there's probably some truth in it. When you think about Jesus and children, you remember the Canaanite woman comes to Jesus, and she says that her daughter is ill. And what did the disciples say? They want to shoo her off, primarily because she's a Gentile. And Jesus even says that, he can't give the crumbs to the dogs. And yet, what's her response? Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table. I mean, isn't that a brilliant statement? And yet, it was so brilliant. What did it do? It actually touched Jesus. So he heals her. Even the dogs get the crumbs that fall from the table. Jesus and children. They bring infants to him to lay hands on him, and the disciples again say that they shouldn't bother him, and yet he takes them in. It used to be said, I think it was by Abe Lincoln, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And of course, he's talking about the validation of mothers. And we know the reality is it takes mothers and fathers to make things work the best. But the reality is we're looking at our future of the church when we see our little children go by every day. They're our leaders. If we all pause, depending on how long we've gone to a congregation or how long we've been there, we already see that transformation taking place. They were this size, and now they're this size, and now they're leading and guiding and taking. My wife and I occasionally get to go to a small country church where they don't have a full-time preacher, and we go occasionally just to kind of fill in sometimes. And we went this past Sunday, and the leader and his wife were not there. They were having their 49th wedding anniversary, and every year they go somewhere. But here's what's amazing. Their two sons did a marvelous job of doing everything that he normally does. And so I told them, I said, tell them that we missed them. However, everything was fine. Because it was. They carried on what their father normally does, and that's a part of the legacy of working with youth as they move forward. So the heartbeat again is I want you to understand I am not suggesting by any means possible that outsiders should come in and hijack your children. But here's another precaution. When you're handling somebody's infant or little child, don't handle somebody else's like you handle your own. Don't stick your knuckle in their mouth. No, we laugh now because we think, you know how people take liberties sometimes in intimate settings that they should not because it's not their intimacy. So when you're interacting, you have to realize that kind of thing. You got to be careful with that. I've seen it a million times. I'm like, I don't think they realize that that knuckle doesn't belong in their mouth. But I can't say anything to them because they wasn't doing it to me, and they were. But I'm watching this, going, man, wow, 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 wow. So there is a legacy, and there is a passage when they pass it on that we need to adhere, and we need to be grateful, and we need to be thankful for. So, the nutshell: foundation comes from the home. We know that, and yet at the same time, if we all pay just a little more attention to those inside the congregation other than our own. We actually heard this one time. Darlene and I were in the foyer, and there was a young man who was there, I'm going to say 13. And here's what he said. He said, I can't believe it. He said, but even the adults here spoke to us. Now, we understand we're all busy. We're all trying to get places. We all got things to do. But we actually heard him say that. We thought that was kind of interesting, that he would be aware of that at his age and enough to make a comment on it. Pretty interesting thought there when you stop and think about it. So we don't want those that we love the most, those are the closest to us, to be the most invisible in how we handle our youth. So let the children come unto me. Do everything you can to make sure that you handle it correctly, but at the same time, encourage them and recognize them and let them grow up serving the Lord. I think we talk about, sometimes they even make this graphic. I think it's, if it wasn't for people and families in the church wouldn't grow. That is the first growing element, is it not? Our own families, of course it is. So I'm not so sure that's a bad thing. I mean, everybody wants numbers. That's fine. We need numbers. We got that. If we share the gospel, people will respond. But the reality is, we don't want to sacrifice our own homes in the process. So, having said that, again, the heartbeat and the foundation is the family. All I really wanted to say is that we can recognize the youth in our proximity, and that we can encourage them, and that we can recognize them when they do things. And I think that that will aid them tremendously in their faith as they grow. And I don't want us to miss that opportunity that's right before us. Now, in this group here, we got many with grandparents and everything else. I'm willing to open it up for a question and answer. If there's anything that you want to add, detract from, need clarification from, we're all in this together. And I would welcome any comments anybody might have.
I appreciate what you said about the importance of keeping our own children. Because we know today a lot of young people are growing up and leaving the church. And I years ago was introduced to the concept of decadal growth study for churches. And when people do that, they break it down like evangelism, baptism outside the congregation, and baptism of family members. But you think about it, I mean, what God has done from the beginning is raise up an army for the Lord. Teach, kids, no matter what you're doing today, teach them. Raise up an army for the Lord. There couldn't be anything more important than seeing our own children.
I mean, when you look at Deuteronomy, I mean, it's, you just read that and it just, it just comes right through you in the morning, in the evening. I mean, the neat thing is kids, they see it. They do. They're not asking anybody to be perfect. They're just asking us, I think, to be authentic. We're going to serve the Lord, serve the Lord. And they see it. They know it. Yeah, I agree. Anybody? Yeah. Anybody else got a comment? Yes. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and especially as they get a little bit older, teenagers. I mean, now you're moving into a whole nother arena. Now, the other thought is, to be fair, I almost, I'm going to say 99% of the time, go through the parent initially as you're establishing contact and having relationships. It's imperative. Um, I will say this. I did say, tell a parent, I said, I just want you to know that I have a number. And their response was, we know you, we respect you, but we also know our son, and we respect him. But at the same time, I just wanted them to know. But it was awesome because of who they are and how they handled it. But those opportunities are there just from saying, encouraging people in the environment of where Christ is. You know, when we think about worship and when we come together, it's a renewal. It is a Sunday morning worship to the Almighty True Living God. And one thing I always try to comment, especially when I'm in smaller congregations, is people are doing this all over the world. See, I actually thought it was just 426 Broad Street, the 15 people that met in a storefront that my grandparents drug me to. For a lifetime, that's what I thought. Then you grow up and you meet a couple people, and then you come to, the preacher there had gone to OVC, so I ended up going there. Then you meet an Alan Stevens. Then all of a sudden you meet a few other people, and all of a sudden the things you were taught get validated by outsiders, and all of a sudden you go, ha-ha. It becomes more and more of your own. But I think it starts when we recognize them and encourage them. It's been said that encouragement is like oxygen to the soul. I mean, anybody can criticize, and some things need to be criticized, don't misunderstand me. But encouragement itself, when something's being done well, or something's been done in a good spot or in a good place, is hard to beat, and we can't miss it. Because they'll get recognized in the world for anything and everything. Certainly we can recognize them in the kingdom and in the church when they do something well. We have a lot of young guys that are just, young ladies that are starting to do things. Here's a great one. How about this scenario? You're walking out, it's Wednesday, you're tired, you just want to get home and eat a late dinner, and somebody says, did you see what we made in class today? What do? Do you and keep walking, or you say, really, what is it, and how, be what? I mean, it's amazing because they'll share it with you. They'll share it with you if they know that you'll listen. Which, is what we do as adults, right? We talk to people who listen to us. Yeah. Any other thoughts, ideas, questions? Yes. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to take liberty on this next story, and please don't. You'll understand the liberty. So when we think about the prodigal son, obviously Jesus is talking about the Jewish people coming to the realization that he is the Christ and that God's going to accept them. But here's just another thought in that story, because we all get it so crystal clear. The guy came to himself. He said, I can go home and my father's servants live better than this. He starts home and his father recognizes him, comes toward him. Here's an interesting thought. What about the kids who didn't have a father like that? Where do they go? What do they do? On the one hand, I'm not suggesting that I think our children who don't obey the faith or don't follow like they should necessarily just because that makes them good, but I will say this. When they come to the end of their rope, if they come, they know they have somewhere to go. What about those in the world who don't know? They have no clue. They really, really don't. They're struggling. They're trying to find a way. They didn't grow up in a Christian home. They don't know what love is. They don't know Jesus. They don't know, is there an Old and New Testament? They have no idea. I saw that a lot when I was at the Christian college. Sometimes those kids, they need a little space, whatever you want to call it. I won't say need space. They take space. But the reality is they know something to come back to, and there's a whole world out there that doesn't. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Father's love. And when we think about that, Jesus makes an interesting statement about children. He said, "You being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. How much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to you or those who ask him?" Now think about that for a second. Is there a parent in here that literally wouldn't do anything for their child within? Don't get me wrong now. This is a joke, and my son would appreciate it, but this is a joke with my son. Son, if anything happens stupid and you only get one call, I'm your guy. I'm always your guy. And then this is the joke, because it should never happen. This is a joke. It's a joke. We might have to give the money back, and you might have to serve a little time, but I'm your guy. It was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. My point being is we're there. We love our children. We love our children. We all do. We all do. And if we could just take a little time to recognize some of the other ones and encourage and recognize them, I don't think it's a heroic thing, but I think over the course of worshiping and being together as the Lord's church, I think it can be a multiplier down the road. Because there's an interesting thing about being comfortable in worship. I've talked to different people, and they say, "Well, Harry, one of the reasons you feel comfortable in church is because you went to college." That's not true. You know why I feel comfortable in church? Because my grandparents drugged me to church when I was little. I know how to behave in there, regardless of what I was doing or not doing, or what my parents weren't doing. I learned, Miss Rosa, watch this. You know what they used to do when I was in church? True story. If you were cutting up, they'd pinch you and pull it, and you couldn't make a sound. I mean, this is in church. But you learned how to behave. We look back on it now, we're like, well, man, that was, they were killing us in there. Maybe we were that bad. I don't know. But there's a comfortability that takes place as they grow and become adults, and then you see them transfer that to their children and then their children's children. And I don't know where my life would be without the Lord or without the Lord's church. I think it's to me, it's every morning I wake up and say, "This is the day the Lord has made. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it," simply because I am whose I am. I am whose I am. And the fact that Jesus loves me and God loves me, and there's brethren who are encouraging and supporting as we all grow and learn, it's just a great, great place to be. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. We're good. Darlene, you good? All right, the heartbeat was just recognize our children and try to encourage them as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
They still are our kids, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yes.